right, Ted, welcome to the podcast, Stories from the Gridiron. One of my goals here with doing this is just to hear great stories like yours. And so welcome on.
Oh, I appreciate it, Brad. Thanks for the opportunity, man. I'm excited.
So, Ted, you were the vice president of human performance for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, could you explain what that job entails?
And every day is a little bit different, Brad, as you know, just living in the football world. So some days I'm a guidance counselor, some days I'm a therapist, some days I'm a strength and conditioning coach. You know, we wear a lot of hats, but overall, when you look at player performance, everything within an NFL building, high school, college, whatever level we're talking about, everything is impacted by performance and therefore will lead into hopefully peak performance. So for me, everything that goes into a day-to-day, obviously strength and conditioning, very, very heavily hands-on there. The sports science aspects, our nutritional components, all the way down to our executive chefs and our performance chefs, where we're customizing specific meals for guys, our player maintenance schedule, how we're practicing certain guys, how we're actually deloading and monitoring specific workloads, and then ties into all the things with talking to our director of operations. And when we schedule travel, if it's a West Coast flight or an international game, if we have to fly to London or Mexico, all those things revolve around the performance of the team. So we have a strategy in place there. And the thing that I absolutely love about being here in Philadelphia is the collaborative approach. There's a lot of people throughout the building that have an impact on performance. It's just not me because I oversee multiple layers of it, but it's impacted by our equipment managers, by our athletic trainers and our sports medicine staff, to our orthopedic surgeons, to our director of travel operations. All those people, our security officers, all those people come in and in one way or another are tapping into and touching and impacting the performance of our team. So that's why, man, it's the greatest team sport, but not just the players on the field. The things that go on in the background, Brad, are the important things that are setting our players up, hopefully, once again, for peak performance.
Yeah. So one thing I hear you saying about human, this is more way beyond just strength and conditioning. This is developing the all around player, from their nutrition to how they get from point A to point B. And I like what you said, the ultimate team sport. And I'm in total agreement with that. And that's one thing that I teach my players is that, one man cannot do it alone. You've got to be a good teammate. And football is the ultimate team sport. So how did you get to the point where you're at right now? Where did your football story begin?
Man, it's a journey. So all the way back to high school, developed a love for the sport. And I grew up in a small town in Michigan, small farming community, where it was really taught, hard-nosed effort. You work hard and you get good things. Good things will happen to you with hard work and effort. So was fortunate to have a great family, great parents, and they're still around. Love my parents to death. But, got into football at the high school level and then said, okay, this is something I want to continue to play past high school. Got into college, ended up playing at the University of Toledo, and then really fell in love with our strength and conditioning coach there in the profession and saw, oh man, this is actual career path. This is awesome. And then I got to know him, and I'm sure I drove him crazy. His name's Steve Murray, and asked him all sorts of stupid questions as I was developing, but then got the opportunity to become a graduate assistant right after. So got to work with him, and then was fortunate, got promoted after a year, and then got basically 15 varsity sports thrown at me on top of still helping with football, but then overseeing graduate assistants and having kind of that first leadership role. And I think I was 22 or 23 at the time. So it's incredibly young, but just an awesome opportunity. And then one thing after another, ended up getting an opportunity to get into the NFL. So left a full-time position with the University of Toledo and walked into basically what was in effect a part-time job with the Detroit Lions. Got my foot in the door, maxed out all my hours. I basically went almost a full year without a paycheck because I'd maxed all my hours out. But you couldn't, it was the best time of my life, Brad. So for me, it was back to that effort, and it was that hard work. But then I got to be in an NFL building and see culture development and leadership from Jim Schwartz, who was our head coach at the time. And then eventually I got promoted after that year, got to stick around Detroit for a handful of years, got to see Jim Caldwell come in there, and then had an opportunity to go to the Miami Dolphins, got to be there with Adam Gase. It was the last time they went to the playoffs. So, went to the playoffs multiple times in Detroit, was very fortunate to see different head coaches and how they modeled their approach and their culture. And then got to see Adam Gase, got to see him do it, and then got an opportunity to go Sean McVay with his staff, his original staff in LA. And that was my first head strength and conditioning job. So, after a year there, got promoted and kind of did something similar to here, but not at the same level, where we were overseeing multiple departments in, once again, a very collaborative approach. And then long story short, got an opportunity to come to Philadelphia. And for me, faith, family, and football are what I live for. And for me, I have to, if I'm living to my morals, I got to make tough decisions sometimes. It would have been easy to stay in Los Angeles. I love Sean McVay. He's one of the best leaders I've ever been around. And I have learned and continue to learn so much from Sean. But this was an opportunity to get me closer to my family. Not only that, but our children, as they're growing up, to spend time with their cousins and my parents, their grandparents. So for me, it was a tough situation, but the Philadelphia Eagles being what they are, and our fan base is incredible, Brad. If anyone follows football, you know just how crazy but awesome the Philadelphia fan base is. And you get to see this and be in a special environment, man. Looking back now, it was a great thing, but it got us closer to family, back on a little bit more. We're in the Midwest, but we're closer. It's a lot easier to travel between here and there compared to California. So for us, it was a great opportunity, but man, the journey is, I went through it really fast, but the journey was everything for me, because looking back, man, I've met some incredible people along the way, players, coaches, coworkers. I'm just so blessed to be able to have done what I've done so far and meet the people that I've met, because man, they've all had a great impact on my life.
Hey, that's amazing, Ted. What would you say the biggest hurdle is becoming in the NFL, or transitioning from the NFL from college? What was the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome?
You know, I'll touch on it again. We talked about this before we hit record, Brad. It's staying focused on the process and not becoming outcome objective. Because for me, if we only look at the outcome, I want to win a Super Bowl every year. But if I only focus on winning the ultimate prize in our sport, I'm going to skip steps in the process. So the hardest thing through my journey, which continues to be the hardest thing day by day by day, is staying locked into that process, staying locked in to the process mentality so that you don't skip steps. When you lock into every step one at a time and you really try to isolate and do everything to your greatest possibility, you will ultimately have success. So for me, how we attack everything is how you attack anything, no matter what we're doing. If it's being a father, if it's spending time with your children, out here coaching guys up in the middle of the floor or out on the field, everything that you pour into that moment is ultimately what's going to lead you to success or failure down the line. So you better be sure that you're putting your best foot forward.
Just to backtrack a little bit to college, when so you were strength conditioning multiple college athletes during that time. What would you say the biggest difference between working with a college athlete and a professional athlete?
And, you know, there's a lot, but I'll start with the subtle things that are similar. Once you're in one locker room, Brad, they're all the same, because once again, greatest team sport there is, football. So I'll just talk about football athletes first. It's the greatest team sport there is. So it doesn't matter what your socioeconomic background is. It doesn't matter where you came from, how you were raised. If you have both parents, if you went through some really tough adversity as a young child, once you get into that locker room and you guys all have a common thing that you're battling for, that brings people together. The star of the team is the team. So when you look at this global sport, if all 11 guys aren't doing exactly what they're supposed to do in the moment, in that process, then ultimately that play is going to fail. And if you fail enough plays, you're probably going to fail at trying to execute the win and the end of that competition. So for me, man, it's the similarities are, once you're in it for the team, you can do great things. You can accomplish great things in life, and especially in the sport of football. That teaches us. And then, you know, the difference is obviously the parking lot's a little bit different when you get to the NFL level, because these guys have some money. But outside of that, which is all changing in college now with the NIL stuff. But for me, man, it's just maturity. I think as a professional and just as a human being, I appreciate those relationships now. And when I got in, I was young when I got into the NFL, but being able to kind of grow up with a lot of those guys, some of my best friends to this day, guys I talk to all the time, are former players or their former staff members and former coworkers. So I've been able to develop those relationships. In college, I think you just had an appreciation for being young and in the moment and things like that. But now as you get a little bit older and I get to look around and actually see, man, this has had an impact on my life because this guy's helped me become a better father. This guy's helped me in my religious path or whatever it is. You just have an appreciation for those things. So I think that's the difference. But I would almost attribute that more to maturity and growing up.
Now, the team, Detroit, the Rams, the Eagles, you've worked with some pretty incredible athletes. Are there any that stick out in your mind in regards to their work ethic and the way they approach every day in their game?
That's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question, man. I could list 100 guys. I'm going to start with one that probably everyone knows, Calvin Johnson. And CJ is literally, here's what I love most about him. we all saw what he was as an athlete. He's one of the best athletes ever, probably one of the best at the position that he played ever in the history of the game. He's a better person than he is an athlete. So I just love watching guys like that. And I love seeing guys have success who truly earn it and deserve it. But man, his parents deserve all the credit because the kid was raised right. And he's one of the best human beings out there. So as you look at people like that, he's one that sticks out because we're talking about the process. He never skipped steps. Every single thing that he did every day, he was religious with just his routine, Brad. He would come in at 6 a.m. and knock out the same single thing every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday. He did it. He lived that process-based approach, and you see the results. They speak for themselves. I mean, I've been fortunate. The other guys, Ndamukong Suh's with me for the 4th team now. Aaron Donald's another one that pops up. Just those guys it's an obsessive level of detail and determination because how they approach the game sets them apart. A guy, he's not a player, but a coach, Sean McVay's like that. I mean, the guy pours into the game of football, and obviously they're having a tough year right now, but they just won the whole thing last year. And just watching how he approaches not just the X's and O's, but from a leadership perspective, he pours into that building because he cares about the players. And now Nick Sirianni, getting to watch what Nick's been able to do here, and with a guy like Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and I could name almost all of our guys because we have high-level character guys, Brad. And when they all come together, once again, for that commonality, for that team-based approach, we can accomplish great things. And I think you're seeing that right now. That's probably what makes this team special.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun watching the Eagles play this season. And it's like Jalen Hurts. I mean, he's just a proven winner throughout college and the NFL. And I feel like he has just transitioned so well into his role as a starting quarterback. It just seemed like a natural progression for him. What is it like working with somebody like Jalen?
Man, it's a dream. It makes my life easy because a little bit ago, he was in here training, and the conversation ranges obviously from the physiological approach, but then how he sees the game and how he sees it from a leadership perspective and just from a human perspective. He almost thinks of it like a coach because he actually did. His dad's a coach. So, as you grow up in families like that, I think you get that bug, and how he sees the game is just magnified because of that history and that background. So working with guys like that, once again, who I would say Jalen's very similar to a guy like Calvin, better person than he is a football player. And sometimes the public doesn't get to see that. I feel, super blessed that I get to see the background, see how these guys approach life and how good they are, just good people who do great things for others. And that's what separates a guy like Jalen, man. He's a young soul. You should hear his playlist. He's got some of the best music ever. He listens to old soul music, but he just approaches the game how you would want your child to, your son, your daughter. So for me, it's a pleasure, man. He makes my life easy because those are the types of guys that you can say, hey, I'm going to throw this at you and challenge you. And then you just watch him go off and he actually dominates the situation.
Well, Ted, I got one more question for you and we can wrap this up. I have a young coach that I work with, and he is wanting to move up and coach at the college level. All right. And he wants to be a grad assistant and go that route. Not necessarily strength and conditioning, but I still think you're somebody that definitely put in the work and grinded it out to get where you are. What would be some advice that you would give? And it might not be a football coach. It could be anybody that's listening to this podcast that has, especially we're coming up on a new year, 2023. What would be some key advice to give somebody that is trying to reach their goal?
And I think, first and foremost, be willing to put forth the effort. It's not always going to be in the term. If it's a graduate assistant position, an unpaid position, you should attack it like you're making $10 million a year. Your work ethic should never change based on your salary, based on your income, based on whatever the inputs are that you're getting back from it. You should always set your standards and your goals in alignment with what your future goals are. So for me, my personal standard better be at a certain level because I fully expect to achieve championship after championship after championship. So when you step in, I love saying this, when you wake up in the morning, take the toe test. How fast can your toes hit the ground? And then what is your first step? For me, I kneel down and pray, but then my first step is in a positive direction. It doesn't matter what happened yesterday. It doesn't matter if we suffered a huge setback, a huge loss, or if we had the greatest victory of our lives. I'm going to take that next step forward, because that's what life is all about, man. It's having empathy for yourself, forgiving yourself when you do fail, fall short, and learning from it. Use that as fuel, use that as motivation. Take your next step forward, but make sure it's a productive step. So for me, I always say this: do your habits of today align with your goals of tomorrow? Your habits are ultimately going to determine if you're successful or not. So if you have a dream job, if you're chasing whatever it is in business and life, if you have something you're chasing, your effort better match if you are determined to get that. So if your daily effort is in alignment with what your future goals are, you're going to be a success no matter what we're talking about.
Dude, Ted, man, that's great, dude. I'm taking this advice as I'm listening to it. I just want you to know that, man. I just want to say thank you. I appreciate your time for coming on. This is going to be very valuable to my listeners and myself, and hopefully some of the athletes I coach. But I appreciate you taking the time out of your day, and I wish y'all the best of luck for the rest of the season. I'm rooting for y'all. I want to see y'all go all the way. And if you ever need any coffee, because I know you're a coffee drinker, just hit me up.
I appreciate it, Brad. Thank you, man. It's been a pleasure.
All right, take care.
Thanks.